Have you ever wanted to go camping, but you couldn't figure out exactly where to go? I'm not just talking about whether to go to the forest or the beach. I'm talking specifically about where to park your car and pitch your tent. How do you know where you're even allowed to camp? In this video, I'll break down how to pick the perfect camping spot so that nothing stands between you and having the perfect outdoor adventure with your family.
Gear up and get outside.
If you really want to get out and go camping, but the thing holding you back is figuring out exactly where to go camping, you're not alone. In fact, a recent poll on our YouTube channel revealed that after time constraints, knowing exactly where to go is the second biggest barrier to going camping for people. So let's tackle this head on. As a note, this video is not about backpacking. This is more about car camping, tent camping, or family camp. As in, you just want to pull your car up to your campsite, unload all your gear, and pitch a tent right next to it. Then you just want to relax and have a good time with your family. That's what this is all about, and that's what Outdoor Empire is all about. We don't have to be hardcore to have fun. Subscribe to the channel if you think the same.
Let's start with good old Google Maps. But stick around because at the end, I'm going to show you some even more useful maps and resources for finding a camp spot that I think you're really going to want to see. So the first thing I'm going to do when I pull up Google Maps and I'm looking to go camping, and if this is your very first time trying to go camping, then I would just search for campground. And granted, this is a big country, right? So it's going to take me near me. Now, the big first question you're going to want to ask yourself is, how far are you willing to travel? And I know just from where I live that all of this stuff, that all these results that just popped up here are all within about 2 hours of where I live. Now, if I'm looking to go across different states, I'm probably gonna have to do a bunch of kind of local searches, and that can be fun too. You know, I can go look here in Central Oregon and I can say, all right, let's search this area. Here's a bunch more campgrounds. But you might even think about, you know, staying in an urban campsite sometimes. Actually, Boise has this kind of pretty nice RV park that's right on the river near downtown, near the green belt, where you could go have dinner in town and sleep on the ground later. You know, that's an option too if you really just kind of want a soft entry into this thing. If you're looking for a more natural experience or a more wild experience, then you're going to be looking out in the mountains. One thing too that Google Maps gives you a general idea at is whenever the map is like this green color, that generally means it's public land. But if I zoom into a place like this, and I know this is a more mountainous area, you don't even really see any roads on the map yet. So then you got to think, all right, so there's some camping up here, but this is probably going to be more remote. So are you good to drive on logging or fire roads to get somewhere? Are you comfortable with that? Do you want to stay within cellular range, whether for safety or entertainment purposes? This consideration is especially a big deal in the West, where we have a lot of area with zero cell coverage, including this area I'm looking at right now. When I really zoom in here, I can start to see some roads. As you can see, these are windy roads. These are logging roads. These are fire roads. A lot of them are just still maintained for recreation, and a lot of them are actually going to be closed. So thinking about your vehicle, the safety equipment you have, and the know-how you have is very important. You do not want to get yourself in a situation or in a place that you're not prepared to get yourself out of. And if you don't feel well equipped to drive a couple hours down a dirt road into the backcountry with zero cell coverage, then you probably ought to look elsewhere. Then again, if you're game for a deep woods experience, then Bob's your uncle. One nice thing about Google Maps, if you're really just getting started camping, is that you can kind of get an idea of what to expect. You can click on a campground like this one. I actually happen to know the Silver Creek Campground. That is a private campground, but let's take this Trail Creek Campground. Even though this is a Forest Service campground, so it's managed, it's public land, it's managed by the U.S. Forest Service, you can still go in here and you can check out some photos. You can get an idea of what you can really expect it to look like. Hey, does that look like a cool place to be? It's on the river. Granted, most of these photos are just put up by people like you and me that have been there, but it still is a good indication of like, oh, yeah, that's kind of the vibe I'm looking for, right? There's even going to be some reviews on there a lot of times. Now, everybody has their opinions, and you see 1 stars and 5 stars all the time, so don't get too hung up on the reviews, but do use this as maybe a starting point, all right? And it's a quick repository for developed campgrounds, both private and public. It also doesn't just work in my neck of the woods. I mean, let's go over to somewhere I've never been. Like, how about down here in Missouri, the Mark Twain National Forest? That sounds cool. So let's search down there. All right, we know we got some national forest here. There's some public land, and then here's a whole bunch of different campgrounds that we could consider. But in my experience, Google only takes you so far because there's 2 main types of camping, at least the way I like to think about it. There are developed campgrounds where you can camp. Think the places that got a picnic table and an outhouse and fire rings and some basic amenities. Developed campgrounds are ideal for beginners, for families, or for those looking for a more comfortable experience in general. These sites are usually the easiest to find on maps and the easiest to access, but a couple of downsides are that you also usually have to pay for them, and there can be a lot of people there. And sometimes when you go camping, you're trying to get away from all that. The alternative is dispersed camping, aka wild camping or primitive camping. Dispersed camping is best for those who want a more adventurous, isolated experience. These are often sites that aren't maintained or managed directly or actively by some kind of land management agency or even private company. So we've got to follow Leave No Trace principles in order to make sure they stay in good shape. If you're interested in learning more about Leave No Trace, I'll put a link in the description below. A couple downsides of dispersed camping are that you're not going to have any amenities there for you, so you're probably going to need more gear with you when you come. You usually can't reserve these sites either, so it's first come, first serve, and you may risk not getting the site that you want. But for people who sometimes like to just fly by the seat of their pants like myself, dispersed camping is an awesome option. You're not going to find much, if any, information on Google Maps about dispersed camping, so I'm going to show you a few more resources for that in a minute. That brings us to our second big question, which is, what are your nice-to-haves and what are your must-haves in terms of amenities? This one is really important as it will really help you narrow down your search. Do you want a picnic table? Do you want a dumpster? Or are you okay hauling out your own trash? Do you want a toilet to do your business in, or are you good with digging a hole and pooping in the woods? Do you want to take your dog, and if you do you want to have them off leash? That's a big one because there are a lot of rules around dogs at campgrounds. Do you want to have a campfire? This is also a big one because in some places out west where I live, you can't have a campfire anywhere right now. At other times, depending on the season and what's happening, you may be able to have them in a developed campground, but not in a dispersed site. And it's important to follow those rules because we have enough wildfires as it is. Or perhaps you're okay with no amenities at all and dispersed camping is for you, because all you care about is being as isolated as possible away from all those people. It's a good idea to jot down a list of things you really want to have at a campsite. This will help you narrow down your options, and if you categorize them as must-haves and nice-to-haves, it gives you a little wiggle room in case you got to compromise on something. Let me show you an example of where you might start looking. Now, this is just a site on the U.S. Forest Service website for the Boise National Forest. And here on their webpage, you get a whole list of all these different campgrounds. And when you go and look at one, you can see what to expect at that particular campground, because it gives you stuff like when that campground is open, because sometimes these close in the winters. Often gives you things like directions so you have a better idea of where it's at or how to get there. And then it'll give you some information about the facilities, including parking and what there is to do there. You know, here I can see at this campground, it's right next to a big lake. They do mention they got a vault toilet. There may be no drinking water available after September 30th, so normally they do have water during the year, and that's pretty common on most Forest Service campgrounds. They'll have a well, a water pump you can get drinking water out of. Gives you an idea of the size, and then it does say it's a fee campground, so there you go. You know you're going to have to pay to stay there. My point here is don't hesitate to go directly to the source. Go directly to the Forest Service website or the BLM or your state parks and recreation site. In fact, Idaho State Parks and Recreation has this great map app, and it's going to show us all of the campsites that you can go to. And this shows you, I believe, not only the state-managed campgrounds, but the federally managed campgrounds, and also some private ones. So here, Dog Creek, if I click on it, I get some basic information, where it's at. Oh, it even has the rate in there, $10, although sometimes these rates aren't always updated. I've found that out. They'll jack them up in early one year, and once you get to once you get to the actual campsite, you find out it's more than you expected. So that's something to keep an eye out for. But you know, this is a Forest Service campground, whereas this one here, no information available. Oh, there we go. All right, so that gives you an indication. Nestor's Riverside Campground. Looks like, oh, it's private. So, okay, cool. And so your state parks and recreation might have the same thing. And here's a campsite that is developed, but it's free. So keep that in mind. Places like this, resources like this are great to get an idea of where you can go camping. But again, it's probably only really going to highlight the developed campgrounds, most of which are going to have a fee. And that brings up the next big differentiator is whether it's a public land campsite or a private land campsite. And the differences between public and private are, as you might guess, private is almost always going to be a paid option. This includes options like RV parks. Private campsites are often great for convenience whether you want to reserve well ahead of time or you just need something for this weekend. Sometimes they have availability on very short notice or just when you show up, first come, first serve. They often also offer a little additional security if that's a concern for you, and even some additional amenities, sometimes swimming pools or a restaurant, some fun things to do around camp. Public land campgrounds are generally managed by state or federal agencies, sometimes even a county or a city. These include lands like national parks and national forests, and they offer numerous camping activities and opportunities. Public land is where you'll find not only developed campsites, but also a lot of dispersed camping options. Here's some resources for looking up both private and public camping options. One you've probably heard of at some point is maybe KOA. This is a company that has been around forever, and they manage hundreds, I think, of RV parks and campgrounds around the country. And here you can go in and you can search for a spot and reserve it. And yes, they do have lots of tent camping opportunities as well. So if the idea of camping in a tent, doing things on the cheap, you don't have to have an RV, but still having maybe a swimming pool and a cafe and a little gift shop and a river to play in, that might make something like a KOA campground a good fit for you. Go in here, you can search, you can reserve, you can pay, do everything right here. Another option is Hip Camp. Now, Hip Camp is like the Airbnb for camping, all right? They've got a lot of glamping opportunities, but they also have a lot of dispersed camping opportunities, or developed campgrounds, or just someone's property that's in a cool spot that they let you rent out to go camping for a bit. So this is a way to access some private land for camping purposes. To be honest, I've never used it. This isn't really my thing personally, but I can see the convenience factor for a lot of folks. I'm going to do a quick search up in Michigan. I've always wanted to go to the Upper Peninsula. I hear it's beautiful. So let's see what some camping options look like up there. A place for $20. What's that? All right, so basically someone's property, you can go pitch a tent on it, you're nearby the lake, you got some things to do. Cool. Does it show amenities? That's what I wondered. Okay, I want a toilet, and that's all I really care about. Oh, wait, hold on. A toilet, and I want campfires. So this is going to show me those options, and here's one for $25 a night. I have no affiliation with Hip Camp or this. Just doing this, you're seeing it live, folks. Well, this looks like an interesting spot. So Hip Camp might be an interesting option to find a private campground to stay on. But guess what? So is Airbnb. Camping. Boom. So camping, of course, you're going to see a lot of glamping opportunities where they got everything there for you. And that might be a fun opportunity too. I've never done that, but it seems neat. I'm going to try to go in here and I'm going to say, I just want to look at stuff under $25. And then I bet it's just going to be some spots. Here's one in Canada. Got a place to pitch a tent, got a little outhouse. Hey, not bad. So you get the idea. Another often overlooked place to go camping is just on private property of people you know. Maybe you've got friends or family with some land in an interesting spot, and you can go camp there. When it comes to finding public campgrounds, then you might start looking like we already showed here on the U.S. Forest Service's website or on the Idaho Parks and Rec website. In the case of Idaho, you can look up other Parks and Rec departments or state parks departments for different states, like here it is for Missouri State Parks. Got a lot of good information on camping there. Now, the BLM manages a ton of public land. In fact, it manages more public land than any other agency. And there are lots of camping opportunities on BLM, especially dispersed camping. More so than you'll find on probably Forest Service, and definitely more so than you'll find in national parks. But perhaps one of the most well-known places to go look for and reserve campsites on public land is recreation.gov. This is a website that manages almost all the reservations you can make for public land management agency recreation opportunities, whether it's visiting a national park or going camping, wilderness permits for hiking and backpacking. I've used this for different things. And here you can search for your own area, of course, but you can see a lot of opportunities and a lot of campsites that are managed within the system that I could go in here and it will show me if there is a reservation opportunity at that particular campground. And here there is. If you like to plan ahead, you like to get a reservation and know that when you show up to your campground, you're going to have a spot and you're not going to have to fight anyone for it or risk there not being any spots left. Reserving in advance might be a good thing. One big downside of this I find is most places on recreation.gov, you can reserve up to 6 months in advance. So all those A-type personalities that are in there early and getting reservations months in advance sometimes push those of us out when we want to just do things last minute willy-nilly. Or maybe we only have a couple weeks notice because of work or whatever. You can even go to recreation.gov and just kind of peruse this list of all these different places they've got opportunities to reserve camping for. A nice thing about recreation.gov is it generally gives you a lot of details about each particular campsite. Not only availability of when you could reserve a spot to go camping, but also it tells you about seasons and fees. It's going to talk to you about rules and what the cancellation policy is if you have to change your plans, facility information. And this is usually pretty good, although I found sometimes it's not totally complete. And when that's the case, I call the ranger district. And I recommend everybody calls the ranger district. If anytime you're going to go camping on public land, it's always a good idea. There's a few reasons why that I'll tell you at the end. Here's the National Park Service website. They have some resources that are going to point you towards finding a campground, but mainly they're going to send you to recreation.gov. Then there is Reserve America. Now, reserveamerica.com as a whole, honestly, I've used this website and I really hate it. I think it's just not very functional. It's kind of a pain to deal with, the website itself. But a lot of state parks agencies or state parks and rec agencies use them as like the contractor to facilitate their online booking program. Idaho has done that. They're in the process of changing right now, I think. But anyway, you might come across them, but this is a place that has a whole big catalog of campgrounds that you can reserve. And this brings us to our third big question is what are you willing to pay for a campsite? The fact is, if you want amenities, you're going to pay for them. And the more amenities you want, the more you're going to pay. Paid camping generally includes developed campgrounds with amenities like picnic tables and toilets. Whereas free camping, which is usually going to be dispersed camping, unless you're talking about sleeping in the Walmart parking lot, no thank you. Free camping is going to offer a more rugged experience without all the amenities. So how much should you pay for a campsite? In my experience, prices range from free up to about $30 a night. And that's for a tent camping site, where $30 to me is really expensive for one night pitching a tent. That's probably pretty standard or maybe even a decent rate if you're going RV camping with hookups. And I know RV sites can cost a whole lot more than that too. As a general rule of thumb, anything around $15 a night is pretty reasonable. Let's look at a few here in Idaho. This is up by Cascade Lake. This is a popular place to go camping here. We're seeing rates from $12 to $16 there. At this one, 12 to 14, 9 to 11, and those rates might depend on the group size or the particular campsite. Maybe the more preferable sites are a little more. Sometimes they split it up like that, or it may just depend on the season. Here's a private one that's 17 to 35. Here's a Forest Service one that's 15 a night. So as you see, that $15 a night is pretty reasonable. There may be an extra fee if you've got multiple cars, and usually they're limited to a certain size of group or a certain number of tents. And if you've got a big group or a lot of people, you might need that group site. And those campsite reservations often have to be done well in advance and can cost up to $100 or so to be able to accommodate a dozen or 20 or 40 people, whatever the size limitations may be. Here's another little spreadsheet I found while I was looking into Missouri. I guess I've got a hankering to go to Missouri. But you can look here, their basic walk-in rate for most of their campsites. This is, I think, the State Parks Division or whatever, is about $15 a night. But when you get into the bigger sites or RV sites, you're paying in the 20s, 40s, even $50 a night. So that's kind of the range you can expect. Here's one word of advice, because I went camping with my family about a month ago to a site. We weren't actually planning on staying in a developed site. We were going to stay in a dispersed site, but we drove through this developed campground and there was literally no one else there. And we thought, wow, this is nice. It had better shade than some of the other spots we were looking at. It was just a nice spot. So we said, let's just stay here. It was $12 a night, all right? I had looked at it before on the internet and saw it said $10 a night. So apparently they jacked up their fees, but they hadn't updated the website. $12, and it was cash or check. Now, I don't know if anybody carries a checkbook with them anymore. I sure don't. But if you do, then you're probably okay. But if you're a cash person, you got to make sure you have the right change, because there's no host at a lot of these campgrounds. And even if there is, they're probably not going to have change for you. So you either have to overpay and then just give some extra money to the government, I guess, or you underpay and you hope they don't give you a ticket. So luckily, this was a small miracle that I had exact change, $24 to stay at this campground for 2 nights. But word of the wise, when you go camping, take an assortment of cash with all the different bills, including at least 4 $1 bills, so hopefully you can make any weird odd number work. Now I want to show you perhaps some of the best resources I've found to find great camping spots. Sometimes there exists some of these blogs or regional websites that are created by some private individual just to help people camp, and you might have to look at an ad or two so that they can run their little business. IdahoCampgroundReview.com is one of those that's kind of handy for Idaho. Now, this has a lot of the same information we found on the Idaho Parks and Rec website, but what's kind of nice about it is you can go click on it and they actually have a nicely curated arrangement of information here. So a lot of bullet points about the basics, about what kind of amenities to expect, garbage services, water, whether or not there's a host, whether or not there's electricity, restrooms. Then they even have a series of photos about different campsites at that campground. So you might have an idea, hey, I want to get there at this time on this date, and I'm going to try to get site number 12 because that looks like the coolest to me. Sometimes sites like these get a lot of flack, but they can also be really useful and interesting. Another site is this Campground Views. Now this has a bit more information in here, like you can click on a campground and it gives you a little bit of information, but perhaps this website is the one I'm most excited about. This is freecampsites.net. As the name implies, it shows you primarily campsites that are free. Any campsite symbol here in green is a free campsite. So it'll give you some information about it. Now, I'm sure none of this information is guaranteed because this is kind of crowdsourced. But when you click on some of these, what I liked is it has some information from actual human beings. And it might help you find more dispersed camping sites because that can be the hardest of all to figure out. Where are you allowed to go dispersed camping and where are some spots that are actually kind of interesting. And this might be one. And this is an area I've actually been to before, so I can confirm that this place up here along this road, dispersed camping is allowed, and there's actually a lot of good places to pull off. And here you get a little confirmation on that. One photo even, let's see. There you go, quite the photo. All right, so freecampsites.net might be a good resource for you to take a look at. Avinza Maps is another site that I've used in the past. They've got a really good app as well, and it allows you to take georeferenced even PDF maps. So think like your old school USGS quadrangle topo maps. If you like that kind of map, but you want to see it on a phone or a tablet or something, then Avinza Maps might be a good option for you. And they have a huge library of maps, often are created or supplied by other people. Sometimes you need to buy individual maps, but this is a really interesting app. And one that I've used and I really like. But perhaps the one that I've been using more lately is this Onyx. This is not sponsored. I know they sponsor a lot of content. I just use Onyx anyway. I use Onyx Hunt and Onyx Backcountry. One of my complaints about them is that they got all these different apps now. I wish they just had one that you could add different modules for whatever you're doing, but I digress. Here, I am looking at Onyx Backcountry on my account. So if I go in here, I can see a lot of different kind of map layers. Main developed campgrounds are going to be marked. Here's an example for Springs Campground. What I use it for is two things. One is to find maybe good dispersed camping opportunities. And while that's interesting, it's not totally reliable and it doesn't have all the data required to really be sure that you're okay to go dispersed camping in a certain place. But where to start is, if you zoom out, you can see what's public land just based on the different layers. Here is government land, Boise National Forest. So all right, already I know I'm on private land or public land. I can look along this road and I can determine, there's some interesting spots. I can change and look at some satellite imagery, and I can see if there's any pullouts. Like here, I can see, nice, there's a pullout. You can even see, that looks like someone was camping there when this satellite image was taken. So this is a great way to kind of find some of those dispersed site options, even if it just gets you in a general area. What I would recommend though that you do if you want to go this route is here, okay, I know it's Boise National Forest, and I can even see here it's the Lowman Ranger District. So I can go then just do a simple Google search for Lowman Ranger District, and I can pull them up, and I can give them a call. Here's their phone number. Give them a call. Ranger districts are invaluable if it's Forest Service land. BLM offices can provide similar information. You call this number and I can find out, all right, I'm going to ask the following main questions, and I recommend everybody that's going to go camping on public land, if you're not have any doubt at all, that you do this. One is, are campfires allowed where I'm going? Yes or no? What are the rules? Don't get yourself in any trouble and don't start a fire. Two is, if there are wildfires in the area, is it smoky up there? Do you know what the weather's been like up there? I also like to ask them about access, particularly road access. I'm driving a minivan. Am I going to be able to get up that road and get there okay? And then we're going to be like, it's going to be pretty dicey. It's pretty rutted out, or you're going to need four-wheel drive for this section or whatever. That is information that is almost impossible to find anywhere online. So call them and ask about access if you have any doubts whatsoever, because I know in that particular spot that we were just looking here, you are not going to have cell service when you get up there. So you better sure as heck know exactly what you're getting into and whether or not you can get there. I happen to know that that road's actually a pretty decent road, but if you're not sure, you need to call and ask. Another thing you might ask a ranger district when you call them, whether you're going to a dispersed camping area or a developed campground, is, does this place get crowded, especially if you're going on a weekend? What time of day would be a good time today to show up to make sure I get a spot? Or what day is maybe a slower day? Insight like that, you're probably going to best get from the ranger station. Now, they're not going to make any guarantees, and sometimes you might even get someone that's kind of reluctant to share intel. But in my experience, you can usually get some helpful information from them. And let's say I was planning on going to this riverside campground here, but I was worried about it being filled up, and I could say, hey, when I talk to that ranger station, I might say, hey, if that campground is all full, are there dispersed areas around that, so that you have a backup plan? Maybe you like Onyx, maybe you like another app, wherever you can kind of get some pretty decent resolution satellite imagery combined with some public land layers, so you know that you're on public land. Then you can have a really good idea, like, all right, yes, dispersed camping looks doable up here. Then I know it's going to be free, I know it's going to be fun, and I know it's going to be accessible. The only thing you might want to double confirm is calling that ranger district and saying, hey, is it okay to disperse camp along Forest Road number 555 up north of Deadwood Reservoir, which is the case here. And then you can really be sure that you're not getting yourself into a pickle. One other reason I like to use Onyx Backcountry is because it has these fire maps, this fire layer right in the app that I'm using. And I use the same app on my phone, by the way, and you can even cache those maps to use offline. So when you don't have cell service, it's still workable. But here I like this because this shows you where active wildfires are, which we have a lot in Idaho at this particular moment. So you can see the whole area that's been covered and also where some of the fire lines currently are. This pulls from a national database of information, so it's updated regularly, and if you click on it, it even gives you some information here about what's happening at that fire. And I just find that to be really helpful when I'm planning my trips. Even if you don't have Onyx, there are two other websites that show a map that are really easy to get to. ncweb.wildfire.gov is going to show you where all the current wildfires are going on right now. You can just zoom in, get in close enough, and you'll see that same kind of layer that I was just looking at in Onyx. Now, a website that's even a little bit better because it gives you a little bit more information than that is this one. It's fire.airnow.gov, and it gives you air quality as well as active wildfire information. And so, as you can see here in Idaho right now, we have really poor air quality, but it gives you that smoke outlook and gives you a report on that. So keep these in mind if you want to work your camping around where fires are. What other resources and tips do you all have for finding campsites? Share with us in the comments below. I'm sure it would help. I hope you're now ready to plan your next outdoor adventure. Definitely do not let the question of where to go stop you. Subscribe to our email list. When you do, I'll send you a free camping gear checklist that I'm sure will be helpful on your next camping trip. And then you'll get our regular email newsletter with all kinds of camping stories, tips, and gear advice. Now gear up and get outside.